Hello, how's everyone? I'm doing fine. We're going to pick up where we left off the last time. This is going to be D, precision part 2, and this is going to be D. Um, the last video. Oh, there's one thing I wanted to say. One time when we were discussing about the spaces without I was talking about perception when what I wanted to talk about was not perception. It was let me see. It was perception. It was perspective. Okay. Um, if you follow along with the tapes, you know this is like a real class. Okay, because I don't edit it. I don't. Um, I don't look at it again, but I do go over it in my mind. That's another thing that strengthens me as far as the YouTubes are concerned, is that I treat it as a real class. I don't go through it afterwards because if you have a real class, you can't either unless you take the class. But what strengthens me is the fact that I can go over it mentally instead of going over and seeing what I said. I go over it in my mind. And anything that you do like this strengthens your abilities, okay? Because you're not always looking at something recorded all the time. So if you were listening to it and you heard perception, and most likely if you follow through, you can say, well, this is most likely he's talking about um, uh, not perception. He's not talking about perception. He's talking about perspective, okay? And then you make the corrections. That's something that helps you out in the class. There's times I've done it. I guess it has to be every so often or a lot. I mean, sometimes if you know the whole class, you can pretty much know if I'm saying something that you know is out of place, but I'm speaking of it in a different way. If you know the class, you know it's probably a mistake or whatever, and most likely I know about it and I keep it going because I know that those who go through the whole program and listen and everything is going to catch it. It's just like real life. I mean, if you're in a class and you know a professor is saying something, you know when he's making a mistake, okay? And that helps you out. It's just like grammar, okay? When we're speaking, and someone who doesn't speak English that well, we add words to them. We add words or we fix it in our own mind, which strengthens our abilities. One, I think the best example of people who do this, and it's like very highly intelligent, is a lot of Spanish people, I guess from Central America, when you speak to them in Spanish and you're speaking poor Spanish, they know how to. If you are educated and you understand how Spanish works, and you speak broken Spanish is not bad. Broken English is not bad, as long as you can communicate what you want to say, okay, and you know that you're communicating. Well, they have the ability, as long as you know what you're saying and you have a basic knowledge of Spanish, a very good knowledge of Spanish, um, they'll help you, and that they won't say anything, and they'll understand exactly what you're saying. But you definitely need that foundation of Spanish. So it's just like if you have a foundation of how this class works and the things that we've all talked about, the things that we talked about all the time, you can tell when I make little mistakes or whatever. So because we talk about so many different vocabulary words, I can actually say um, sometimes it's easy for me to to say another word when I mean another word, but I catch myself. Okay, so now I have to. I don't know why I got mixed up with perception which is something I have to think about. Perception and perspective, okay? So perception to me, as far as dance without music, is actually to perceive something or a concept, to perceive a concept in your mind. So let me see, perception and how can I say this? Okay, perception and perspective. Okay, so I have to keep that in my mind. Per, pers, Perception is like when you visualize something, and perspective. Okay, so let's go on to perspective. Perspective is when we were talking about the AAAAA times AAAAA. We perceive it, and when I wanted to talk about it, I didn't want to talk about it in a perspective. Am I doing this right? Yeah. I didn't want to talk about it in a perspective. So that's what, and it was strange because it was our first time, it was my first time excluding perception. It was my first time excluding perspective, okay? And there's something there. I mean, like, I'm speaking out perception and perspective. So there's something there that I'm going to have to work on because there's something, it's changing something. So it's an important point. And when I leave this video, the next video, I'm going to talk to you about it. Because things change. Like I said, your mind develops. This class is developing a lot of things that I didn't realize. So now we have perception and perspective. So let's finish that. Now we're going to talk about we're going to continue the conversation that we had before about the times okay? I see a screen, imagine a screen, okay? So because I said it, I put it up on a screen like. When I say I don't want to have a perspective, it means I want to just go wherever I want to in it. I don't want to say I'm at the center, and from the center I can see what you call them. So that's not perspective. I don't want to use any perspective. I want to just perceive what I see, and then we're going to talk about it again. So we talked about and we're talking about spaces. I use, like I said, I use to denote different spaces. But I want to really continue our conversation about just the spaces itself. Okay, we use the times which will give you I'm going to say it to help you out, 5 squared, okay? And you know how many are there. To say how many, we're going to go back over it. I have to say it. And there's another thing too. We're talking about the floor, okay, of this floor of spaces that has the times okay? The floor. But when I'm speaking to you, and all these things are important, I perceive it. Now I can see where it's coming from. I perceive it in front of me, okay? So now I can see why I was getting the perception and the perspective kind of mixed in, because I was using perceiving of this. And I perceive of it like right now, okay? So I can perceive okay? So I just see all of that, but now I clear the sounds out, and now we're just going to talk about the spaces, okay? Very important. I'm going to just add on and continue the conversation about what we did last time, okay? We have a center, okay? Forget about the now. Forget about the A, and the 5 squares or whatever. Now they're all spaces, okay? Or we can't say cells yet, because if you notice, I can't perceive of the I can't perceive of the floor with the squared amount of spaces, okay, yet, but I perceive of it as it is in front of me, okay. And that's an important point. Everything counts. Everything is important. So we have a line, and another thing too, an intersection, because we're going to use all this vocabulary, and we're going to be able to do this very well as we go on. I said the center space, okay. I want to clear up some things. First, I talked about the center space, and then there was a center line. The one thing that I didn't want to talk about, but we can talk about it now since we have knowledge, and since we talked about it once before, so we can build on it, is the fact that all these spaces are cells, and they all look the same. They all look the same. Another thing too, I say they're cells. A cell has length, width, and height, okay? But we're not there yet. We're still at the point to where we just see a plane, a flat plane, okay? And we're going to get to that too. So when we're talking about the spaces, we're talking about something that we just perceive, and we're just utilizing, and we tore apart the symbols. Now we're tearing about the sounds as and now we're just dealing with the spaces. So I was saying that there's a center space, but then, and when I talk about something, when we talk about the spaces, I'm going to talk about each space in the square, and when we finish we're going to cover all the spaces of the square. There is an intersection, okay, before we called it a cross, but then but we can build on that, and we can strengthen this conversation by saying, okay, so an intersection, okay, we're going to talk about the intersection, but there's one point I wanted to bring out about about the conversation about the spaces, is that I was afraid to talk about the fact that if I talk about one cell, there's other cells that are exactly like that in a different place. I don't want to be afraid about that. I want it to have a knowledge of that. So that's one point I wanted to say. Now we're going back to the cross. There's the cross, and there's an intersection. An intersection is, and there's an intersection in the squares, in the spaces that we're talking about. An intersection is like all of the points are equal. They're divided, okay? Not so much divided. An intersection means it's all the line of spaces crossing. I can't say line of spacing crossing, because that's one point that they make a mistake in mathematics or in a lot in life. We say an intersection, but I don't want to, it's an intersection, but there's a line, and once we speak of that line, because remember this, we're making it specific we're going to make this specific for the floor. So this math is going to be specific for the floor. So we're tearing a lot of things apart. So when we go back to intersection, if I talk to you about a line of spaces in the center, It could be two lines. It could be, if I say the line of spaces, okay, since we have it on the screen, there's one point of perception, no, here we go again, a perspective that I can use, okay? Because we still have it up here, we know that one is at the top and there's a bottom, okay? As far as the sides, there's one on this side and there's one on this side. So I want to drain the conversation of perspective, but there's still a little bit perspective, which means that it seems like it's something more like for instance, when we talked about force, speed, and direction, they're all one, okay? So now I can see more as a perspective. I want to highlight, I want to take away the perspective part. So we have a perception of something which has a perspective. But I want to take as much perspective out as possible. So because it's on like a screen that I perceive, we do have a top, we do have a bottom, we have a side over here, and we have a side over here. Okay. Now, getting back to the cross. So that means if I go from one in the center, if I go from one side to the other side, we use those spaces up. And in that, if I go from here to here, and don't say left and right, we don't use left and right. Because when we're walking, most of the time we don't think about left and right. We say over here and over here, okay? So if I start with the spaces over here, okay? And remember, I could either go from here or here or here or here, but I decided to start from this side. And I guess I can say count the spaces, and once it's counted, we're going to talk about something else. And this conversation is going to develop and turn into something very beautiful, okay? So we have a space, which is in the center, and then we have a space toward this side, and a space which ends that line of spaces. So we talked about those. In that fact, there is no intersection because we're just using spaces. It seems very, it's very important that you understand that, okay? Because when you're in this realm of powers, I just want to make a mental note to myself, because I want to talk about a new power. So I want to make sure I talk to you about this power. Okay, so now, when we're in this realm, everything's very important, very important. So when I just told you, we talked about those spaces. A space in the center, a space, and then another space. Okay? So now we have completed that. Now we're going to talk about the space on top of the line of spaces that we just talked about. Let's do it exactly close to what we were talking about before. Let's go above the center space, okay? We can talk about it, but we can't. That's already done. It's in the line of spaces that we just talked about. But now there's two spaces. We're not going to talk about numbers. So there's a space on top of that center line space that we just did. On the center, I can say center, the one that we covered. And then so there's a space above that one, and then there's another space above that one. Okay? So we completed that. Then under the side of the center space, there's a space under there, and then there's another space under there. So we completed those. Now we have a space over us. Oh, now we have, as far as all the spaces, there's 4 corners. On the 4 corners, over by the 4 corners, okay, one corner, and that's one thing, okay, no, we don't have to worry about that. One corner on this side, has a space that makes up that corner, okay? So we have that space. Then we have a space beside it, which connects to that space, and it also connects to the space that we just talked about above the space of the center. Then if we go down, we can go down to another space, okay, and that space is a corner of the space of the center space, okay. So we have one more. Remember, we can say one. Then we have another space next to the space that we just talked about, which is, remember the line of spaces is on top of the line of spaces on this side, and it's below the space that we started with, okay, that we just started talking about with the corner of all the spaces, okay. So we finished that. So now we're going to go to the opposite side of the space and the space and the space and the space that we just talked about. The opposite side, the space and the other space that's at the edge, and it's above the center space, okay? Above the center space, okay, we have a space that is the center space, and we talked about that. We talked about another one above that one, and then another one above that one. If we go over to this side, there's a space there, okay? We can go over again toward this side, and there's another space. We go down one, and there's a space there, and then we go over this way, and there's a space there. So we finished that. Now we're going to talk about the bottom. We can't do a line because we did one line, okay? So we have a space, 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 a space. So we haven't included a space, a space, a space, a space, and a space, a space, a space, a space. Those are the ones we have to talk about now. Okay, so remember the 2 spaces that are below the center space that we've talked about. There's 2 more that's beside that on this side, okay? So we've talked about, now we adding those 2 spaces. And and by those 2 spaces are another 2 spaces, which are at the end on this side, at the bottom corner, okay? So we have another 2 more spaces that are beside those 2 spaces that we just talked about. Now we're going to go to the opposite side. It's exactly the number of spaces that we just talked about. The only thing we have to do is go to the other side, the edge of the bottom on this side, and the bottom of the numbers that we are talking about, the spaces that we are talking about. And we can fill in those spaces with a space, a space, a space, a space. That's it. Now, if you notice, we just had a little bit easier. It was a little bit more relaxing. The first one that we just did on C, precision part 2C, it was a little bit hard because we had just started it. But you notice this one has developed, okay? We know more rules. We're getting away from using numbers. And we know now that we have a perception, our perception that we have of the spaces, that there is a perception, there is a perspective, a very slight perspective, because we got rid of a lot of perspectives. Okay, that finishes that conversation, which we're going to continue. Okay, now before we get into the other part where we're going to actually do some more walking inside the square, the square of spaces, there's another power that I'm going to add, and that power is structure. Okay, just like all of them, we have another power. I can't go over the powers. Just can't go over the powers. Like I said, it has to be started at the beginning. I mean, you can start here, but if you complete it from here, and it's a long time, you can complete it from here, you won't be able to communicate with people. You won't be able to help people learn it because you don't know the different mind that they're at. When you talk to someone, you won't be able to perceive where they are, because from the beginning of this course, and this is 3 years, we went through mental stages, and in order to understand people's mental stages and where they are, you have to go through them so they can feel that you understand them, that you went through it as they did. You'll lose a lot of money. That might help you out a little bit. But you can do it, but the thing about it is you'll have a lot of holes. And another thing too, if I want to add something that's very rudimentary, it'd be hard for you to understand something rudimentary. It'd be hard for you to understand if I say, remember when this happened, when you were at this stage. So I'm just saying you have to go from the beginning. That's the only tragic part of it. It's not as tragic as actually coming up with it. It's tragic. To come up with this class is tragic. Don't even talk about it. Okay, so now we're adding another power, okay? The power is structure. And remember, we don't use terms, physical terms, okay? Because it keeps you in that structure, and also another reason why I don't do it, because then I'm getting into someone else's field. And someone knows about the body way more than I do because they studied it. They're probably doctors, they're whatever. I'm not going to go into those words. But no one knows the powers like I do because I've been through it. I mean, I went to this new study. I did it from the beginning, okay? Okay, so now structure. What holds up structure? Structure organizes the powers. And it's a power, and it organizes the power. But it's very important. It's hidden, but it's very important. Okay? I'm going to show it to you real quick. Okay? Structure. The structure holds this. Okay? Remember this coordinate? It holds this. Remember this. This is a coordinate right here. This is a coordinate right here. Then there's an angle in that tool. That's the structure. Okay? That's the structure. Okay? There's a structure of the retrocé, the movement of the retrocé. It's a retrocé movement. Okay? That's a structure. There's a retrocé here. I mean, there's a story. I mean, not story, but first floor. Okay? That's a structure. That's a structure. It organizes the, what do you call it? The piso. Okay? It's organized because of the structure. Okay? And the story. the structure organizing all of that. Okay? That's the structure. Okay. See if there's something else I wanted to say about the structure. Oh, it organizes. It also, let me show you. I always use this book, I don't know why. Okay, what's called is here. Okay, and like this, okay, so now we have this. What's organizing this, the direction, is the structure. It's organizing it. If I go like this, okay, there's a lot of powers into this, okay? And if I sling it across the room, that's the structure. The structures, in order for it to do that, the structure is organizing it, okay? That's the structure. It's organizing everything. It organizes the powers. So now we're getting, and now the only thing we have to do is do, we were at the turn. Now we're doing the, what do we call it? Now we're going inside the cells, okay? Remember, there's cells. The rooms, but they're cells. We call them cells because of the graph paper. Because the graph paper and because it's in the mathematics, we're going to call this cell. We go from one cell to the other, and we did a turn, okay? That's what we did inside with the center cell. We advanced up, and then we advanced up again. That's the edge of the quantity of cells that we're working with. And in order to go to the next countable cell, I decided to turn to the other. Now we have a perspective. Now this perspective, like I said, when we have our quadrant, it's perspectives all over the place, okay? We perceive and we have perspectives. So we went to the other. We turned toward the other side, the other coordinate, toward the other coordinate, okay? Now there's one thing about having the formula in our mind is that I don't have to put my back to you, because I hope you get this point. I don't have to put my back to you because it adjusts in my mind, okay? So I'm going to start here, okay? I'm going to start here, but you know that I started from here to here to here, okay? But I can adjust it in my mind. I hope you get that point. So I don't have to put my back to you, because my mind adjusts it, and I can always I can adjust it anywhere because it's in my mind, okay? So that means I can make the turn, because we're not going to make we have a space. When we turn, we have a space and a space, because we're in a line in the center, okay? The center line of spaces. So I want to turn. I did the turn, and at the turn, there's a space and another space that I could go to. But I'm going to turn and then make another turn, okay? We did the turn the last one. So here we go. Okay. And then I should be right in front of you, okay? So we're here. We turned, and we're actually, I would say, we're still in the same, like I said, we're still in this cell, okay? We're still in this cell, okay? But remember, the balance points, I'm using the same balance points. So if I make one move, then we're in another cell, okay? So I'm going into another cell. There's one thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, there's one thing I wanted to talk about. Remember, we did make the turn. So I'm back at the other cell, okay, where we just turned. But there's one thing, so the cell that we just, the cells that we have completed are actually here and here, okay? So the cell is actually here and here. We did a cell, and then we did another cell, and now we're in this cell. So we did a cell, and a cell, and we turned, okay? Okay, yes, okay. So we're still in that line of cells in the center. I hope you get that, okay? So as soon as I make a step, I'm going to get out of that line of cells in the center, okay? So now I'm out of the line of cells. Even if I go back, I'm out. I specified in a function that, like for instance, like right now I can actually say, the function will tell me, I can make the function to where I'm still in the cell that we talked about yesterday in the last video. Now I'm changing the function, okay, and I'm making it into the cell going into the next cell. So now I did this, I started the new function, okay. So now I'm in this cell. And I can do this. Remember, the balance points holds the cell up. Okay. And now I'm going to turn in this cell. Okay. Which puts me at the edge, okay? And the cell that we've done is, we have one behind us that we have done. We have one here, one on that side of it that we just done, and we have a cell here and a cell here, which is the center cell. So we turned, okay? What I want to do is I want to go up one more. Okay, so we did the turn. Okay, we did the turn. Now if I take one step, if I take another step, we're in the other cell, okay? These are all the balance points that we can have, okay? And I can go up like this, okay? And I will go back down, okay? Okay, so we completed that cell, and that's as far as we're gonna go. So let's see what we did. So as far as the cells are concerned, this is what we have completed, okay? Let's make sure, okay, yes. We completed the center cell, okay? And the thing about it is that it can move. I moved it so many different places. I mean, I could have stayed in one place and acted so you could see, but the mind is not like, I mean, the mind really likes to do it its way, okay? It doesn't want to make provisions for something that doesn't really matter, okay? Like for instance, it just does things in a very organized, how can I say, there's another word for it. It's innovative way, okay? So it's a very innovative way. So in going back to the spaces, I'm going to bring it up, perceive it as if it's in the front of me, and now we're going to talk about the floor spaces that we completed. We did the center, and then we moved up one, and this is where it has a top and a bottom. We did the center. We moved up one, okay? Then we moved up again, which makes it at the end of all the total amount, at the end of all the spaces that we're referring to. Then we made a turn, okay? And we moved to another cell, okay? So we have that space. And then we turned again, okay, back toward the one that we had done that we had did before. I don't want to use any numbers, even the second, third, or whatever, okay? So we add a space, we moved up a space, and then we moved up again. Then we took a turn this way toward this side, okay? And then we turned again. We took a turn this side, and we were in that cell, okay? And then in that cell, we did another function. We turned again, and we're going back in the direction, the opposite direction, as opposite direction we were going in when we started. And we did another cell, okay? So we did a cell, and then we came back around and did a cell, going back down, okay? Okay. All this is forcing you to visualize, okay? Just forcing you to visualize. It's not the other way. If I use symbols, you're going to put the symbols in your mind, but now you have to use your mind to visualize, okay? But the mind, like I was telling you about, okay, the mind it doesn't have left so much I mean, how can I state this? When we started, the cell, okay, it could be from the bottom to the top, or it could be from the center to this, or the center to the bottom, or the center to this side, okay? If you notice that, okay? That's something that we're going to strengthen also, okay? But now we're going to say, but the reason why I had to explain that to you is because I was able to go forward in front of you, even though it didn't. When I started it, I was going before you, okay? But if I had did it visually, like I'm saying, if this was done visually, so you could perceive it visually, I would have had my back to you on two times, okay, two spaces, okay. But because it wasn't visually, it was mentally, okay, I was able to move it around. And that's something that we're going to have to strengthen. I mean, that's something that we're definitely going to continue to develop that, okay? Because you have one space, okay, you have a center space, but if you go up two, it's the same as going to this side to down to that down to, because the mind, like I said, it doesn't so far, at this point, it doesn't have that, not saying ability, it doesn't have to have, it doesn't have to have the left, the top, the bottom, this way or that way. It's utilizing spaces. It's any space. So like I said, with the perceiving all the spaces, if I say one space, okay, the center space, that's one space, okay? It's no other space like that. But if I say the space above the center, there's other spaces exactly like that if I drop all perceptions. Okay, that's as far as we go for now, and then we'll do it again. We'll do the rest of it. Okay, this is really going far, but we're doing great. This is year 3. I was thinking about that. It's great. It's so beautiful. I hope everybody sees it. Thank you very much. Waiting for the next one.